So far in the retreat we've looked at the tracking of the body, and yesterday we moved on to Vedana, feeling. And we looked at this in relation to body. We experimented with it in relation to breathing, but Vedana covers every aspect of experience. So it's very useful when working with a particular experience to ask yourself, what does it feel like? Particularly working with the mind. Mind is very subtle. So how do you make the mind, the state of mind, a meditation object? It always helps to ask a question about it, about the state of mind, that directs awareness automatically to the mind. And a good question to begin with is, what does it feel like? I might realise I'm caught up in some kind of mind state, some kind of difficulty, for example. And the first question I might ask is, what does this feel like? And I don't need to get an answer in words, but just asking the question directs my awareness to the Vedana of that mind state. For example, with thinking, when we get caught up in thinking, what does it feel like to be caught up in thinking? I'm caught up in thinking and suddenly I realise that there's thinking. Perhaps at that moment the thinking itself disappears, but I can ask myself, what does it feel like to be lost in thought? And there will be still a feeling left over from what it was like to be in thought. So this is a way of directing awareness to the mind itself, to the citta, the third of the four foundations. This morning we're going to move on to the citta, to the heart-mind, and we'll start with using thought itself as a meditation object. This is tracking the thought stream. This practice is important for people who are bothered by thinking. If you have a mind that won't shut up, if you have a mind that won't let you meditate because it won't stop thinking, then this means using the language we've been using before. We have primary object, secondary object. Primary object is what we choose. I choose to be aware of, for example, my breathing. The secondary object is what chooses us. We have no choice. So I choose to be aware of my breathing, but I find that the mind is taken over by thinking. I have no choice about it. And so that becomes my secondary object. We use thinking when it's a distraction. Some people are not particularly distracted by thinking. It doesn't bother them very much. So they won't use this. It won't be important to them. Other people are particularly bothered by thinking. It really gets in their way. So they will use this. One of the ideas that people have about meditation is that when you meditate, you're not supposed to think. And so possibly in the interview after some time there might be an expression of discouragement because I'm still thinking. But meditation can work perfectly well while there is still thinking. It's rather like saying, I'm no good at my meditation because I can still see. Or my meditation is not working because I can still hear. Of course, the senses keep working. That's what they do. Mind is a sense. And as a sense, it's sensitive to mental activity. So one form of mental activity is what we call thought. And of course, that goes on while we meditate. Why should it not? If the samadhi, the concentration or unification, is strong enough, we will forget to think. It just won't arise. But it can continue. We can be practicing meditation quite well with thought continuing. It may be, for example, we might discover that there are breaks in the thought. There might be gaps between thoughts. The thought might lose a lot of its power that it had before. These things can happen. But the thinking itself may well continue. It's not a big deal. What's important is that we stay with the meditation object. The only problem is when thinking pulls us away from the meditation object. Then it's a problem. And the way that we resolve that problem is not by somehow stopping thought. It's by making thought the meditation object. And it's a very good meditation object. It's not about not thinking. That is not important. What is important is that we know, we understand our thinking. That's important. What we're going to do are exercises in studying the thinking mind. The main reason why thought becomes a problem is because of our habit of identifying with it. The mind's job is to create meaning. It's to create a world that makes sense. Here we are, we're sitting in this hall. Now we've been talking about the elements. If we resolve this experience down into its elements, we've got hardness, softness, movement, heat, cold, and so on. We have seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. What the mind does is it takes all this information and creates meaning out of it. I am here at SBS doing a meditation retreat on a sunny morning and I'm feeling like this. All of that is the mind's job, to create that meaning, that story. And one of the ways it does it is through thinking. So, for example, you've probably noticed that a lot of thinking is commentary about the experience. Often people find that somewhere up in their heads there's this small commentator who is explaining to the listener all about the retreat. What's good about it, what's bad about it, what day it is, how long before we leave, what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what should be happening, what should not be happening, who these other people are, what they're like, why don't they leave, and so on. This little commentator going, blah, 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 blah. It's creating meaning. It's telling us this is what it means. And it's telling us this is who you are. This is who these people are. This is who you are. So it creates the self. Thinking is a major form of the way in which we create our sense of ourself within our world. And this makes it both very important but also very destructive. It can be very destructive and habitual, difficult to drop. It makes thinking very attractive because if we let go of our thinking, we might let go of ourselves. And one implication is that when we track the thought stream, when we use the thought stream as a meditation object, this takes us directly into the experience of anatta, of not self. Because we begin to realise that a thought is just a thought. That's all. It's not me. It's not you. It's just a thought. Full stop. It can be a very powerful practice. Tracking the thought stream, well, any form of meditation involves developing what we might call reflexive awareness or recursive awareness. This is awareness of awareness, the ability of the mind to know itself. Now this is basic to meditation, it's basic to mindfulness. Remember how we talked about mindfulness in the experience of realizing that I'm distracted. I'm thinking, I'm lost in a thought stream, and then suddenly I know that I'm thinking. I remember. So that act of remembering is mindfulness. At first, there's awareness. The thought stream is flowing. Suddenly, I know that I'm thinking. There's awareness of awareness. This is recursive awareness or reflexive awareness. Awareness that bends around and looks at itself. This capacity that we have as human beings is fundamental to doing a meditation practice. And when we meditate, we use this all the time, and we make it stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's particularly important in tracking the thought stream, because tracking the thought stream requires us to step back with our awareness and watch the thoughts themselves. So this capacity to turn around and watch ourselves becomes very important. We have to step back, separate ourselves from our thinking, get out of the thought stream and watch it. It's like being in a river, being swept along by it, and then climbing out onto the bank and looking at the river. This is what we will be doing. One of the best analogies that I've come across for this practice was expressed by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, a contemporary Indian sage, who talked about this practice by comparing it to a mother watching a child play with a favourite toy. So the child is playing with the toy, and the child is completely caught up with the toy. The mother is very interested in this, but the mother's interest is not in the toy, it's in the child playing with the toy. So you see the difference. There's a stepping back and a getting the whole dynamic. When we are lost in our thinking, we are like the child, completely obsessed with the toy. What we want to do is to become the mother watching the child play with the toy. So we step back and watch ourselves play with our thinking. The tracking of the thought stream is very much watching not the content of thought, but our relationship to thought. It's very important that we realise that studying thought does not mean getting involved in the content. When we think in meditation practice, a good working assumption for the meditator is that every thought that I think is a lie. Every single thought is a lie, including the thought that every thought is a lie. All of them, without exception. We are not interested in what we are thinking about. For the meditator, that is boring, tedious, useless. What we are interested in is the process of thinking itself and our relationship to that process. It's like we're watching this stream and we are not interested in what's in the stream. It's the stream itself that we're interested in. It's a subtle distinction. But don't get caught up in the content of thought. What we are thinking is not important. It's the fact of thinking which is important. So what we'll do is a series of very brief exercises in tracking the thought stream. In each one of them, we'll start by anchoring awareness in the body. We use the body as the foundation, as the basis. We will start with the body, establish awareness there, and then at some point I will ask you to turn your awareness to the thought stream and look at some aspect. So you do that. If you find yourself getting lost in thought, come back to the body, re-establish that connection, and then return to the thought stream. So let's get into our meditation posture. Establishing the meditation posture. Constructing it from the ground up. Feeling the whole body. And from there, settling into your normal meditation object. And now, stop thinking. Don't think. Just stop thinking. Okay, did anybody succeed? We had about a minute.
You stop because you're concentrating on the breathing, but it's at the back of your mind ready to come out.
So you stopped because you're concentrating on the breathing, so you're able to stop it by concentrating on something, but it's at the back of the mind ready to pounce at any moment. Boom! So maybe you wouldn't be able to stop for very long. The pressure might build up. Did you stopped? No problem? So you just stayed with the breathing and there was no thinking? Yeah? Anyone else? Yeah? Success? Anybody fail hopelessly and dismally? Some succeeded, some failed, and others don't know.
You say when you stop thinking, then all of us definitely will go into breathing in and out, concentrate. But to me, we're still grasping on something, not to think.
When I say stop thinking, you head to your meditation object, grasp it,
So you grasp
and you're
it,
grasping on
and
something
you're blocking.
to block the thinking.
To me, when you're grasping and you hook on it, it's still, to me, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
This is the difference between being able to block thinking, keep it away, which you can do if you hold on to your meditation object strongly enough. The difference between that and thought actually not arising. Now the first one, if you block it for a while, you can only block it for a while. And as soon as your concentration starts to waver. It's back in. As distinct from, it simply stops and it's just not arising. There's a big difference between the two. The interesting issue here is, why is it difficult, if not impossible, to stop thinking? And if I can't stop thinking, then surely any kind of meditation practice where I'm relying on my ability to stop it, this is not a good strategy. It's not going to work. I need something else. So let's continue our experiment. You notice that we haven't asked the question, what do we mean by thought? What is thought? This exercise, we're going to examine that. We're going to ask the question, how do I know that I'm thinking? So if you get into your meditation posture, constructing the posture from the ground up, settling awareness into the body, and going to your normal meditation object. And from there, turn your attention to the mind. Are you thinking? If you are thinking, and if you know you are thinking, then thoughts must be appearing to you in some way. How do thoughts appear? Do they appear as words, as visual images, as feelings, as combinations of these, as something else? Study the flow of these thoughts. Don't focus on their content, on what they are about, but on their appearance, how they appear to you. How do thoughts appear? Okay, so what are thoughts? How do they appear?
It's funny that when you hear the birds singing, you won't have a thought. You only know that the birds are singing. But you hear the motorcycle sound, that it seems like you are a bit knowing it, familiar with it, and you start to have a thinking.
some sounds don't stimulate thought, like the bird. Other sounds do stimulate thought, like the flow of the water.
That natural sound, maybe I already hear so many days or what.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have a thing.
But when thought does arise, what is it? How did thought appear? Pictures, visions. Visions? Yeah.
Naming.
It's naming.
Naming.
So words naming the experience. Yeah.
In words, it was the recollection of the experiment before this. Before this, when there was no thought, until Patrick said, stop thinking. And then this thought came up. Oh, that is supposed to trigger off the thinking. Then I was waiting. Then we stopped there, waiting. Thinking. So in words, it's just the recollection of previous time.
So in words, and in this case you were recollecting the previous exercise when you were sitting there calmly not thinking, and then I said stop thinking, and you immediately started to think about not thinking until you gave up thinking about it. Anybody think in feelings? Yeah? Predominantly, would you say? In this past minute? Mixture. So a mixture of images, feelings, words as well. Would you say feelings are predominant or just part of the mixture? Just part of the mixture. Usually when I do this exercise, what people come up with are these three: words, images, feelings. Some will be predominantly one rather than the other. Some would say there's an even mixture. For me, I'm predominantly words. I'm a word person. But those three seem to be the most popular forms of thought: words, visual images, feelings. This is about tracking the appearance of thought. What is thinking? I can start to track what is going on. Is it blah, 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 blah? Is it a scene flashing through the mind? Is it a whole series of feelings, of emotions? And by separating these out, I can then see words as just words, images as just images, feelings as just feelings. So I'm starting to deconstruct the thought stream by looking at it, the way that it appears, rather than getting caught up in what it's about, the content. Is this making sense? Shall we try another experiment? Yeah. You're saying that if thoughts appear as feelings, the thought itself would have a feeling. The thoughts cause the feeling. Therefore, there should be, if there's feeling, there should be something else as well. Yeah. So whatever it is that causes that feeling should also be in the mind. If there's a feeling, then in the mind, then there must be something that gave rise to that feeling. Then the question is, well, what is that? Yeah, it's a very interesting question. You can see that it starts to open up. You might start to get interested in that. I notice that there's feeling flowing through the mind, and then I want to know, well, what is it that's stimulating the feeling? The feeling is about something. So what is that something? Then I can direct awareness to there, and that would be a very interesting project. Once you open this up, once you open up the mind and start to have a look, it's enormous. There's so much going on, and it's so useful for the meditator to get to know.
Actually, what about seeing colors in your thoughts?
Seeing colours. You mean visionary experience when you meditate? Or
You close your eyes and then the thoughts come, and then you also see colors in your thoughts. Is it common or
is it common to see technicolor thoughts, colours in the thoughts? I think it's fairly common. There's a few people nodding.
so you cling on to the thoughts because you see colors?
Yeah, if the thinking is attractive, we'll cling to them. And often it is attractive. And when you meditate, once you develop some degree of samadhi, of concentration or unification, the mind is more powerful. It's also calmer, and it produces a much better quality of thought. It's not that when you meditate more, you don't get distracted. It's more common that you get a much better class of distraction. You get much better quality distraction, because the mind's so much more powerful.
I don't understand that. That is very deep. What do you mean by a better class of distraction?
Well, you might, for example, see nice visions. You might see nice colours, very attractive, very vivid. And you think, this is great, this is really nice. And I only see these when I meditate, so these must be very profound. I must be doing very well in my meditation, and so I'll stay with these. And it's just another distraction. But it's a much better one than before the retreat when your distraction was, think. Or some people have profound dharmic thoughts when they meditate. The example I like to give is one time I was in Burma doing walking meditation in the meditation hall, and I started writing the first chapter of this fantastic novel. It was really good. If I had stopped and written it down, I'm sure I could have made a fortune. But I realised, no, I should note this and go back to do the meditation. So you can get very interesting, attractive, profound kinds of thought coming up. In my case, again, words, but in some cases, if it's images, you can get spectacular visions coming up. But it's just more stuff. So let's try another experiment. This time we will look at the question, where do you think? So if you settle into your meditation posture, and settling into your normal meditation object. Now turn your awareness to the mind. Are you thinking? If so, turn your attention to the place where you think. Find the location of the thinking. This is similar to finding the location of physical sensation. The difference is that physical sensation has physical location, but thought may not. People usually experience their thinking in the general area of the head, and it may be useful to begin there, but don't take anything for granted. Where do you think? Is there a specific location? Is there more than one location? Or is there no location at all? Where do you think? Where do you think?
I couldn't find the location of the actual words. I assumed that that I thought back here, but when I looked at it, it was actually physical sensations associated with the thought in the back of it. But the words forming themselves, I just could not find where they were.
Okay, so in this case you're thinking in words. You thought you had it pinned down to the back of the head, but when you actually looked, what you found were physical sensations associated with the thinking, but you could not locate the actual mental words themselves. Is it your impression that there was a location that you just couldn't pin down, or did you think that there was absolutely no location?
I suspect there's no location, but there could be at one time.
So it's still an open question. Yeah. One interesting thing here is that you have, in this case, words, so thought, purely mental, but there are physical sensations associated with that thought. I find that whenever I think, there's some kind of physical tension in the body. Very, very subtle. But there's always some kind of physical tension in the body. And one way, if you find it, one way of tracking the thought stream is to track that pattern of tension. Anybody else? Yep.
My experience is even before that, the second one, I continue with the third one, is in the location. But when you say the location, it's not really a location, it's just my whole here, especially on my face here, on my third eye. There's a force feel when you say it's like sensation, force. But there's totally no thoughts at all. But the feeling, still come back to the feeling or the sensation, it's just like a graph, a flat line, but with a very small little wave. I only can draw it in that sense if you want to describe what's the meaning, feeling or sensations. That it could be flat line, because a flat line, mean no more thinking. Yeah? It's just a flat line, it's so tranquility that there's no thoughts at all. And then no name.
So you have a general sense of mental activity in the area of the whole head, but especially the front, and especially centred around the third eye area. Is it when you made that gesture, are you going outside the head, or are you meaning inside the head?
Inside.
Only inside?
Yeah, right. Zoom.
So you weren't thinking in the normal, conventional sense of the word, but you did detect a kind of ongoing buzz of mental activity. There's some kind of mental activity going on which is not what we were previously talking about as thought. Like not words, it's not images, it's not feelings, but it's some kind of activity going on, and it's going on all the time. And then you made the speculation that to have a flat line, you'd have to be dead.
Yes. Because I have to explain to something, so I have to speculate.
We could take that as speculation because we're not dead.
Yeah.
The point raised here, of course, is the very fact of mental activity itself. Mind is incredibly energetic. If we're young and vigorous, we might think of the body as energetic. It's got nothing on the mind, on the energy, the pure power of the mind. So when we start to tune into mind itself, one of the things we find is its energy, its activity, and that mind is ceaselessly active. Now this activity may come out in the form of thought in the conventional sense, or it may simply be surging around in some other sense. In my experience, one of the reasons why the mind is so determined to think is it's got so much energy, it has to do something. So it will, if there's nothing else to do, it'll just create thought. But when you drop beneath that level, what you find is this energy field. So this brings us into the whole area of tracking the energy of the mind. In the language that would be familiar in this culture, you could say the chi of the mind. If you look at the body, look at it closely, it resolves into energy, into the four elements that we've been talking about. Or you could say it dissolves into chi. If you look at the mind, that too dissolves into chi. The energy field, you have, in a sense, you have the body, hard, solid, it's out here. You have mind, completely non-physical. In the middle, you have energy. And it's this central area that we're working with a lot when we're doing meditation practice. So one way of working with the mind is to tune into the energetic feel of it, the energy field of the mind. Get a sense of that, and it can be a very good meditation object. And when you're tuned into the mind as energy, there will not be thought, because it's simply energy itself. When you miss that, when you drop it, the energy will transform into thinking in the conventional sense. Anybody else?
Can I ask a stupid question?
Stupid questions are always welcome.
This thing, are we fixated with the mind being here?
We are fixated with the mind being here. Why on
If
earth?
it's energy,
Yeah,
if it is energy, it can be anywhere.
it can be anywhere, absolutely.
It can be in my foot.
Could be. But again, let's not speculate. Let's find it in the foot. The job of the meditator
That's why I say when I listen,
is to find it.
when we listen, when there's a sound, when we're meditating, the shift is almost like nanosecond to the ear. It gets it, and then it's its sound. And then I don't even know whether it's coming right up here, going through somewhere, and the words form sound. I don't know whether it's actually at this point where the mind says sound.
The mental recognition of a sound occurs here. It doesn't occur in here. Similarly, the mental recognition of bumping one's foot against something occurs down here. There's no reason to think that the mind is confined to up here. This is a bizarre Western superstition. And I think the sooner we get rid of it, the better. In science, the brain is considered very important. In Australia, when I listen to discussions about mind, conducted from a scientific perspective, people will use the word mind and they'll use the word brain interchangeably, as if it's the same thing. From a Buddhist perspective, this is complete nonsense. The Buddha never associated mind with brain. There's a classical meditation called the parts of the body, the 31 or 32 parts of the body. The earlier version of this does not even mention the brain. It doesn't even mention it. The brain was considered so unimportant that they didn't even bother to mention it in the meditation on the parts of the body. They just didn't think it was important. This tells us something about what they thought the mind was or is. And it's not this modern scientific view. So drop the idea that if we're examining mind, we have to go up here. That is, from the Buddha's perspective, that is not the case. We'll be talking about citta, which is the term often translated as mind. It can equally be translated as heart. Sometimes when people do this exercise, where do you think? A surprising portion of meditators would say, I think here, in the heart. And it goes up into here. But this is where I think. It's quite interesting. But some people will say, no, I think down here. Or I think out here. In indigenous Australian culture, I heard that Aborigines were horrified when they discovered that Europeans think that they think in their heads. Because to them, it's obvious that you think in the landscape. Thought is located out there. Never take anything for granted. But really watch what's going on. Okay, we're running out of time and I'm running out of recorder battery. So we'll draw to a close. But I hope what this hour has taught us is, first of all, you don't have to be a victim of thought. Many meditators think that they are victims of thought. Thought is what prevents me from meditating. This is complete nonsense. If thought is getting in the way of your meditation, then make it a meditation object. It is a very, very good meditation object. It is very rich. You can never get to the end of it. There's a tremendous amount of insight to be gained from it. The trick is, do not get lost in the content of thought. What you are thinking is of no consequence. It's of no importance. It's how you are thinking, where you are thinking, the feel of what you are thinking, the energy of what you are thinking. This is what we mean when we say the process of thought. This is what's important. What we've had is a couple of exercises in how to get started on that. There are other ones you could try. For example, where does thought begin? That's a nice one. You have to be fairly alert to be able to do it, but you start to turn your attention to the very point where thought begins. You catch the beginning of the thought. It's like you're a cat outside a mouse hole and you know the mouse is going to come out there, but as soon as it comes out, boom, you catch it. You catch the very beginning of the thought. That's a nice one. That's quite interesting. Another one would be catch the gaps between thoughts. A thought arises, it ceases. Then there's a gap. A thought arises, it ceases. And then there's a gap. Or is there a gap? Look for the gaps between the thoughts. This will be another one. And again, having an attitude of playfulness with it. Play with it. Don't take it too seriously. If you take it too seriously, it gets too heavy. You can't do it. But do it lightly. Do it playfully. And start to get curious, interested in the nature of the mind and what the mind is doing.